let's move on to our final half of the video. Now, we're going to be talking about a guy. I think his name is Rob Kowalski or something like that.
Yeah.
He it's kind of the Christian polygamy guy,
Hmm.
essentially. Now, he is not Mormon, so I want to make that clear for the rest of our video. We're probably not going to talk too much about Mormonism at all. I don't have any
Right.
comments on it. But I thought I'd combine them together because, polygamy is still Mormon related, obviously. And we've been talking about Islam and other polygamous related religions. So, uh, yeah, I guess we'll kind of just get right into that.
Let's do it.
Let's Let's see what we've got. All right. So this guy, background, he's a little bit of a kind of red pill type dude.
Okay.
Um, but let me just kind of go over what polygamy is. What is this? He's going to be talking about polygyny. People are like, what the heck is polygyny? What? So, okay, as I understand it, here's what they are. Polygamy is having more than one spouse. That's like the umbrella term. And then you have polygyny, which is a man uh, who has a husband who has multiple wives. Then you have polyandry, which is a wife with multiple husbands. That's really rare. Then you have group marriage, which is like multiple of each. And then you have another one that you probably heard in our culture, polyamory, which
Hmm.
is, I guess, like sexual partners, but you're not married. It's not,
Okay.
um, So he's going to be talking about why polygyny is okay. And yeah, I know in the United States, I'm pretty sure in every single state, uh, bigamous marriages, that's more than one spouse, or more than, yeah, having more than one spouse, those are void ab initio, which means they're just, you cannot legally get that.
Okay.
And thankfully, that's the way we're going, but hopefully those laws don't change anytime soon.
I hope not.
But um, why don't, before we even begin, maybe I should kind of go over just a little bit. Well, you know what? Actually, you know what? We'll save it. I was going to go over some of the stuff on polygamy, but I'll just say this is a tough issue for some people because of the fact that the Bible technically doesn't ever have a specific command at any point where it literally just says the words polygamy is wrong. It doesn't say that. But it does say a lot around the issue.
Yeah.
So it'll say, like, kings should not have multiple wives. It'll say, don't marry your wife and her sister. It'll say, uh, elders in the church and pastors should be the husbands of one wife. And it talks about, your wife or your husband. It never talks about multiple.
Hmm.
And any time where we have an example of multiple, we end up with usually a lot of bad stuff happening. And we'll kind of talk about that as we go. But we end up with um, sort of arguments from silence sometimes on both sides
Right.
for this. And so what you have to do is uh, kind of look at you either have to say what's clear from Scripture, what is silent on Scripture, and then there's sort of that reading in between the lines, which is what we typically have to do for a lot of this. But anyway, let's get into it.
It's your boy, Rob Kowalski, quickly becoming known as the Christian Polygamy Guy, back with another video, and this video is entitled 5 Reasons Why Christian Men Should Pursue Polygamy. Yep, this is going to be a doozy, so stay with me. All right, before we get into it, I need to tell you that I am a committed Christian. I am a Jesus follower. My life is completely surrendered to Him, and I would not do anything that I didn't believe that God was okay with. To all my fellow Christians out there, let me just tell you this: the Bible has no ban on.
Okay, so I'll just start off with this, and you feel free to tell me if you want to pause it or at any time. But
Okay.
he starts by building his ethos. He builds his credibility. He says that he's a committed Christian, but that doesn't mean, we should remember, that just because someone is a committed Christian, that everything they say is therefore valid, right? That it's
Yeah.
it's biblical. So he could be mistaken, and as we'll argue, he is mistaken.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And no, even that, when he says, he gives that caveat, right? He says, my life is completely surrendered to Christ, right? You're going to see here in a minute, he's going to pull up his Instagram and kind of plug himself. I want to look at a picture that's on his Instagram reel, just real quick, whenever it comes up.
Okay. Do you have it?
I don't, but he'll show it in the video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Polygyny. Now, I'm going to be using the term polygyny and not polygamy because polygyny is the technical term for a man having multiple wives. But seriously, take a moment to think about that. The Bible explicitly forbids all kinds of things and has punishments for each infraction, but polygyny ain't one of them. No punishments, no condemnation, not even a negative word about it, nada. So let's put to rest this idea that it was some Old Testament thing that God just allowed because of war or wanting to populate the earth thing. The whole house of Israel, our spiritual ancestors, came from a man with 4 wives. And let's all...
Okay. So first off, I'll full disclosure, a lot of my commentary is based on that of Mike Winger. Mike Winger did a review of this video, so a lot of mine will be borrowed from him, but I do have my own arguments, so full credit to him for the parts that he gave me. But he starts out with this whole House of Israel idea, written by a murderer, and I would add an adulterer, at least some of them were.
Yeah.
The Torah came from a murderer. Moses killed a guy. That doesn't mean that murder is okay, or that doesn't just because you have someone who did something, that is descriptive. It's not necessarily prescriptive. So you have to kind of look, again, read between the lines sometimes. Sometimes you have a description, sometimes you have a prescription, and sometimes you kind of have something where it's like, it doesn't seem like it seems like it's describing something, but like, what can we glean from it?
Mm-hmm.
But we'll go through examples and kind of show why that's not accurate.
Also be real with ourselves. The divorce rate, even amongst Christians, is sky high, up to 50%. So don't tell me that monogamy is some magic fix. It's time to rethink our approach. Our current setup is far from perfect.
Okay. Divorce rate is 50%. That's among the typical population. As Mike Wenger points out, if you look at Christians who regularly attend church and are serious Christians, right, not nominal Christians,
Yeah.
you do not see that level of divorce rates. That's just not true. But what I will say is this: even if that were true, even if Christians were divorcing each other at 50%, which I don't believe, but even if that was true, that wouldn't mean that polygyny would improve the divorce rate.
Right.
Right? That doesn't get us there. And then he also says our current approach is far from perfect. I would actually agree that culturally our civilization's approach is far from perfect. But that's not the fault of Christians. It's the fault of people who devalue and redefine the institution of marriage, like this guy, for example, and who devalue and trivialize and pervert sexual interactions, like the left, for example, who promote things like polyamory, which is, I know it's a little bit different, but it's still that idea of like changing the institution. Oh, we're going to change it to have gay marriage, or we're going to have, free love, or we're going to have polyamory. You don't even have to have a commitment. Or you can have one night stands. What's the matter with fornication, right? All these sorts of twistings of what God has made very clear.
Yeah.
So the reason why we have a bad system isn't because God has a bad way of doing it. It's because people like this guy are going in and perverting things.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
For more on this, go check out episode 88 of the Kowalski Analysis podcast, entitled Investigating Polygamy, A Biblical Perspective. Before we start, make sure that you're following
Is this what you were talking about?
Yeah, just keep going real quick.
me on Instagram. My username is @RobBKowalski. I post daily motivation and updates on what's going on.
Okay. He said, my life is completely surrendered to Christ, and I would do nothing that he does not approve of. Look at that picture of Jesus with that t-shirt on. You see that?
What does it say?
It says Jesus is King, BITCH. You think Jesus would want you to post a picture on Instagram of him wearing a shirt like that? And the reason I'm saying that is because if he's going to make this grand claim of his holiness, I do nothing that Christ would not approve of. Nothing. This is something, if you know a tree by its fruits, you see something like that where he is blatantly throwing stuff on Christ like that. That is, I would say that's kind of a red flag. Anyway,
that's a good catch for sure. Yeah, and it's again, it goes to show you, even if he was, saying he's committed to Christ, that wouldn't prove that everything he's saying is true. But I think, especially as you go through the video, especially when we get to the ending of the video, stick around for that. You will very quickly see where this guy's motivation and where his his heart lies. And again, I'm not saying, oh, he's wrong because he's got a bad motive. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that statement that he's like fully devoted to Christ, you'll see how that might not really be the case, especially as we go through his arguments. He doesn't quote scripture very much, which is fine. He's allowed to not do that. He can make these practicality arguments, but you'll listen to some of these things and it just sounds so self-centered. It's not Jesus-centered. It's not Bible-centered. It's self-centered. But you'll see it for yourself. We'll let people see that for themselves.
Going on with my life. Now let's get started. Reason number 1, scarcity of virtuous women. The wisest man who ever lived, King Solomon, he said this in Proverbs 31:10. Who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? Now, why would he say that? Because virtuous women are scarce. Think about it. Finding a virtuous woman in today's society is like finding a needle in a haystack. It's like finding a diamond in a sea of cubic zirconias. Seriously, have you seen what's out there lately? So hold up, Pastor. You're telling me I...
Okay. So let's kind of pause it there. This argument I found very bizarre. Now, I think he's actually right about this to some extent. I would say it's hard to find a good woman these days in our culture. I think if you're looking in the church, you're going to find it a lot easier to find them, especially if you're going to a good conservative church.
Yeah.
And it might also depend on your region too. Where are you? Is it a really left-leaning state? Is it a right-leaning state? How much, feminism is kind of creeping in? If you live in Texas where you do, probably I would assume it's a little more of the cream of the crop down there, but depending on where you are, it might change. I understand that, but there's two ways to interpret this argument. One is that there aren't that many good women, so you should spread your bets out essentially and hope to catch one by chance. Essentially, kind of put your chips on 5 different numbers and just hope that one comes up good. The other is that strong men should gobble up the very few virtuous women that are left and leave none for the rest of us. And based on what he says throughout the entire video, I can't really tell which one he's saying here, but I would say both of those sound completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's not many women, so I should take all of the ones that are there that are good and leave you guys the scraps? That sounds ridiculous. What are you talking about? And then the other one, well, there aren't many women, so I'm just going to marry a bunch without vetting them in the first place. What? No, that's not, that's like, what? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
All right.
Lately. So hold up, Pastor. You're telling me I get one chance at this. I get one golden ticket, and I'm going to give it away to a woman that's been dating around and possibly sleeping with several men before me, and then I got to come along and pony up? That doesn't sound realistic.
Well, no, I'm not necessarily saying that. We're saying you can be celibate or you can search for a virtuous woman, right? That's a false choice,
It's
right?
like a false dichotomy.
Well, you're saying, right, I'm either stuck with, being celibate, or I have to marry a woman with a promiscuous past. Well, no, you could just wait and keep looking.
Right.
That's another option. I mean, you said, oh, they're in short supply. Well, that doesn't mean there's zero supply.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as I'll talk about a little later too, you have to understand you've got issues too, my brother. I mean, you might, I understand. I'm not for this whole. There's a little bit of a balance to it. I think some people say, well, Jesus says we need to forgive people for their past and stuff like that, and that's true. At the same time, I also think it's, we need to have consequences for our actions. It wouldn't be fair to say, oh, well, this woman is not promiscuous and this one is, and they should both be given an equal chance. Maybe not. I don't know. I understand the arguments there.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to understand that men aren't in a great spot either. You know, we might not be sleeping around, but we're looking at other things,
True.
sexual sins and whatnot, that we need to be forgiven for too. So I would just advise that as Christian men, or as any men really, this applies to everybody, we not go super far into that judgmental, irredeemable kind of spot, because that might come back to bite you. You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and like he's gonna go on to make a comment here in a minute about like would you marry a woman with a past? He's gonna make that comment, and
Yeah.
the thing is, absolutely, if she's redeemed, if she's been bought by
Right.
Christ, kind of like with what you just said, if she's done this thing, if she's had this past where maybe she's been promiscuous, well, has she been redeemed?
Right.
I was promiscuous in my past. Thank God I'm redeemed, and my wife can accept me apart from apart from that sin. I messed up. I made horrible decisions up until, well, even I'm still a sinner, obviously, but I made those horrible decisions up until Christ found me and saved me. And if I was to be judged for the rest of my life because of my sins before Christ, I mean, no one should accept me, because I didn't deserve Christ to accept me, but he redeemed me. And if his redemption has touched me and his grace has been shown to me, why can't I show that to somebody who has had a promiscuous past like I have? Right.
Right. Right. And I certainly see the idea of like, okay, that can have effects on people, and
It
I
can.
think people have the right to take those into account when they're
No, for
looking for a
sure.
spouse and
For
say,
sure.
okay, do I, okay, well, you know, this person was sleeping around and they got AIDS or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, I don't think it's wrong to factor something like that in,
Of
or
course.
what, that's an
Right.
extreme example, but you get
Right.
the idea.
Yeah.
you know but this does not necessarily come from that. I think when he says this, he's talking about this like it's oh, you're ruined for life, and that's not really a Christian way of looking at it. We have to balance true observations about the world, that sin has effects on people, and
Yeah.
you have a chance to marry who you want, and some people might be better choices than others. But at the same time, we also have to remember redemption, just as you
Right.
rightly pointed out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, let's keep going here.
That's not even fair. So listen up, man. Answer this question honestly. Would you marry a woman with a past if she was one of 3 of your wives and not your one and only? I think the answer.
Do you hear that? Would you marry a woman with a past if she was only one of three? Oh, so it's like it's just a little bit dispersed a bit. It's okay.
Dude, man.
I'll trade up. You know. Oh, it's okay, honey. I'll marry you. You're kind of broken and bad, but
I'll take you in though. I'm a pretty good alpha guy. I'll bring you in.
right.
Yeah.
As long as I've got some other women later on, it'll be okay,
Man,
and you'll
but
be
but
chopped
but just
liver, right?
just think about that. How belittling, like when that comes out of his mouth, how belittling that is to that woman. You're
Yeah,
broken. You're not as worthy as these other two that maybe were virgins when I met them, right? But you're
mhm.
this broken one. You're one of three. So I don't really have to put much thought into your past. Man,
Exactly,
man, you're just telling her she's trash. Like,
exactly.
oh my gosh. And how is that loving your wife as Christ loved the church, like Ephesians 5 tells you to do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's exactly right, and that's why I said earlier, I won't even have to tell you to see this. You'll see it on your own.
Yeah.
This idea about um, like he says he's committed to Christ, and then you just listen to the stuff that comes out of his mouth, and you're like, I don't know if that's like your number one priority. I'm not saying you're not a Christian necessarily, but like that doesn't seem to be like the highest priority in your mind when you're thinking about this stuff. The stuff
Yeah.
you say doesn't sound Christ-like. Uh, and he says, okay, one of three. You know, you'll notice he's kind of contradicting himself. Now he's implying that after enough time, you could find a virtuous woman. So a minute ago he was saying, well, there aren't enough virtuous women. Now he's saying, well, what if you marry one that's bad and then later you marry a virtuous woman? Well, hold on. I thought we couldn't find them.
Right. What
Now
happened?
you're saying, well, we will find them.
They're coming
Well,
out
in
the
that
woodwork.
case, then wait. Just be celibate until that point. Like, I,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just be satisfied in Christ. Like, and I think that's what's missing from from all of this. Like, yes, 99.999% of people are called to be married. You have those couple Pauls that live their life in celibacy and they are content in Christ. And you'll notice in this video, he never makes that an option. In fact, he belittles that. Like, he'll go on to say, like, well, you're going to tell this woman who's searching for a godly husband, like, well, we'll pray for you, instead of bringing her into your house. And you're like, dude, what is wrong with like a woman learning to be content, or a man even learning to be content in his singleness while Christ draws somebody to him? Because, and I've heard a pastor say this, how do you know, right, if you're called to singleness, right? Do you struggle with porn addiction? Do you struggle with any of this stuff? And if the answer is yes to any of that, then you're not called, right? God, it's not going to feel like a burden to you. Paul delighted in the fact that he wished other men could be like him. He wished other women could be like him. It wasn't a burden to him. Anyway, tangent. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's good. And I'll say this, I again, because I want to be fair. I always want to be fair. Yeah. I think that he has a point when he says, look at our things are falling apart. We got 50% divorce rate, maybe not in kind of Christian community, but it's still out there. They got divorces going on. We got women with, going out and being promiscuous. He doesn't quite say anything about the men. That's true as well. But it's true what he says. Yeah, women are going out and they are certainly more promiscuous than they were a long time ago. It's hard to find good quality women a lot of time. I agree with this. I think maybe not in the same way that he's saying it, but I tangentially agree. But his solution to it is not an actual solution. The solution to people are going around fornicating, and therefore, I guess, well, I'll settle for this one and then I'll trade up later. That's not the solution. The solution is, let's get everybody to stop fornicating. You see what I'm saying? The solution is plug the hole. Don't create another hole in the dam. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. We don't let the floodgates open, right? Because we got a leak. We get the putty out there and we get some spackle or whatever the heck they use to fix the dam. I don't know, duct tape, whatever. And we fix the problem. So I don't think adding a problem is going to fix a problem. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Right.
There's an obvious yes. Polygyny offers a realistic way to clean up the dating cesspool that we find ourselves in. Reason number 2.
The dating cesspool. We're going to clean up. You're part of the dating cesspool, little lady. I'm going to clean this up. You don't have to bury me. You're part of the cesspool. What?
Supporting and protecting women. Right now.
And then he goes right from that to, we're going to support and protect the women. Yeah, you're part of the cesspool, honey. Now we're going to support and protect. Wait, what?
Yeah. You're in the cesspool.
Now there's
to protect you.
Yeah. And okay, well, let's
major imbalance in the numbers game when it comes to marriageable women to men. Just in the United States church alone, there are 20 million more women than there are men. That's a whole lot of ladies who need a covering, and they need someone to look out for them. But what do?
Yeah, and this first off, this guy's gonna be the one to. Yeah, I'm gonna look after you. Do you think many women? Let's listen to the women in the chat. Do they want this man to look after them? Does this kind of sound like the good guy you'd want, like being in charge of you? I don't think so. But notice how he has now switched his argument yet again. He's contradicting himself. Just a second ago, he was talking about how, well, there aren't enough women. Where are the women? We got so few ladies. And now he's saying, well, there's 20 million more women than men. Where we go? We don't have enough men. Well, which is it? Do we not have enough women or do we not have enough men? So now based on his last argument, he might be saying that you should marry the unmarriageable women to take pity on them. But again, why is that the solution? Maybe the solution should be that women receive the consequences of their actions, and maybe they have to stay single. Or maybe we show them grace, just as many of us men need grace for the sins we've committed sexually. Or maybe we find a way to make the church more masculine, which I think is a problem we have. We have a very feminine church, and that's why men aren't showing up. This is a true statistic that he's bringing up. Yeah. Well, there's all these women in the church. Yeah, because you go to church and it's like gossip time. The ladies, oh hi, and I mean, even you go to especially Protestant churches, even on the windows, at my church, for example, one of my churches that I go to, I go up there and you see in the windows, it's all the like pink and purple clouds, and it's like grace and mercy on the windows that they put, and that's true. Those are nice things. But you go in as a man, what do you want to see? You want to see like the armor of God, apologetics, become a warrior. Yeah. You want to see like the kingdom of God. Like, oh yeah, we're part of a kingdom hierarchy. Yeah. They don't emphasize the masculine parts of the religion, and there are absolutely masculine parts to Christianity.
Yeah.
If you're a guy out there and you think Christianity is a fruity religion, I got news for you. It's definitely not.
Yeah.
Now, the state of our churches is very feminized, though. So, like I said, there are other options he's not considering. We can allow women to receive the consequences of their actions and just remain single, which the Bible says is something available to us. We can show them grace just as we need grace, or we can up the amount of men by making the church a little more masculine, saying, hey, like, we gotta make some appeals to men here. We can't just make this all fruity and girly all the time.
Right.
So we don't solve a problem by adding another.
Right.
We do. We put them in an impossible situation. We tell them, we'll pray for you, but then we basically assign them to a life of fornication, marrying a pagan, or spending a lifetime alone and becoming the cat lady in the process.
You're going to become a cat lady. Or we tell them that singleness and devotion to a vocation, like Paul talks about in the New Testament, is what they should do. So again, he presents a false choice.
Well,
right?
yeah,
Paul
I mean,
talks
no,
about singleness.
it's totally like the false choice, false dichotomy. Whatever it is. I mean, you are not only left to those options. Like he is, again, I won't belabor the point, but he's leaving out just like I think kind of like what you said, that beauty in somebody being able to be satisfied in Christ, and God will draw you to somebody in His sovereignty. He will If God is in control, then He's in control of your singleness. He's in control of who you're going to marry. He's in control of all this. And he constantly throughout this video belittles. He doesn't openly say like, well, I guess he kind of is belittling singleness because he gives that option. Well, you're just going to become a cat lady if you stay single, And if a woman is listening to this and she hears that and she's like, he's right, I'm just going to become a cat lady, instead of reading what the New Testament says about her if she's redeemed. And it says you're a child of God who He loves and who He does, not in the prosperity gospel way, but who He does have a plan for, right? And Lord willing, that plan will involve a husband, and
right.
you can still live a fruitful, abundant life being single through Christ and not just become a cat lady,
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I'll say this as well. When you say, okay, he belittles singleness, he absolutely does this outside of even the women, for example.
Right.
I know that Mike Winger, again, I talked about, full credit to him. He did do a video on this, and I know that he has responded to Mike somewhere. I know that I saw a post from Mike. He was talking about how this guy said, well, look at how it's always these nerdy looking guys who always go after me for what I say, and this guy couldn't get a date if he wanted to or whatever. Now, Mike Winger is married, but even so, you notice he's belittling. It's not about what's true or biblical. It's about I'm an alpha. It's about me,
about what makes
not
me feel
about
better.
Jesus.
Right. And see, and I was going to wait till later, but I watched a short that he had just before we got on this live.
Okay.
And so he was actually talking about his idea of monogamy pre him becoming a Christian. And so kind of not an exact quote, but basically the video, it was him explaining how he thought, how he was obviously taught in church, monogamy is the only way. And basically they were teaching that biblically this is what God commands, right? And because that's what he thought or in his mind at that time, he was like, because I thought that was my only option, I didn't want to follow God. So because he didn't have the option to have a polygamous relationship, which is what he thought in his heart in that time was true, and that's what he wanted, he didn't want to follow God because God commanded monogamy. Okay, so he's literally taking this idea of God, he's admitting it, that he's forming this God into his own image. If it doesn't fit my desire, if God doesn't want me to have what I want, then I don't want God. And I think what he forgets is everything we've experienced, like in our lives, all of us, right, is a post-fall world. We don't know, like, what it was like when Adam and Eve were living together in harmony in pre-sin in a monogamous relationship, and it was beautiful. He didn't desire anybody else. He was free from sin. And we don't get to experience that, but in our carnality, we want other women. We want other people brought in because we're not satisfied. And what he has done is shaped God into his own image so that he can have what he wants. And then that obviously comes out so much in this video.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in fact, because I'm trying to pull something up for us, do you want to tell us a little bit more about like what do you think about polygamy in the Bible? What do you think the Bible says about it in terms of like what arguments would you make?
Yeah, no, I mean it's obviously in there, right? It is descriptive as far as polygamy goes, right? You see, you heard Mike talk about this. He's like, you have Jacob, you have Abraham, you have all these people that had multiple wives, and every single time it ends horribly. It ends horribly. And when you see these sisters fighting over what Jacob, right? Like Leah and Rachel, they're fighting over their husband. They're selling, like I think Leah gave because she was the uglier of the two, right? So or the least attractive of the two. And she was like, I'll give you. She gives her sister some food or whatever, and she gets her husband for the night, right? So,
right.
So there's this competition, and this is what polygamy and polygyny or whatever he calls it is going to ultimately give. And you even see this play out in the scriptures. This fight. Sarah gives Hagar to Abraham. What does she do? She gets jealous. She hates the fact that she gave birth. Right? She was her idea, and she sees the consequences, the fruit of her actions, and she hates it. Right? And
exactly.
She sends Hagar away. Right? And again, I guess if I'm going to go to an argument against it, I heard a really good example, I think, of like what would go against this idea, and it was Christ in the church, right? If he's going to belabor this point of I am submitted to Christ, my life, I'll do nothing apart from Christ. If Christ is all about polygamy and exalts polygamy to this huge thing, why does Christ only, like you see in the marriage supper of the Lamb, you have the bride of Christ and Christ. If Christ is all about polygamy, why is there only one church? Why is there only one bride? Where's his mistress? Where's his second wife? If this is how we're supposed to be, if this is our bent, why is Christ not about that?
Yeah.
Well,
and in 1 Corinthians, for example, Paul talks about a wife shall have her own husband.
Yeah.
All to herself, own husband. So where's this sharing come from? And we hear from like, the Old Testament, there's polygamy. The first guy to come up with polygamy is Lamech or Lamech in Genesis 4:19. This guy is a bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay. We learn like, okay, he's the father of people like play the flute or something like that. It's about all the good we hear about him. We hear that he's sort of a man of excess. He had two wives. He was excessive with his wives. He was excessive with violence, and he had a distorted view of God's mercy. So he talks about how he killed a man. He might have killed two people, depending on how you read it, but he killed a man who hit him. So he gets hit, and then he commits murder.
Yeah.
You get battery, and then he commits murder in response, right? He's excessive in these sorts of things. This is not a good dude. And the whole point of that, as you read, you keep going in Genesis 1 through 11. After the fall, you end up with people who are slowly they're there to show the slow degradation of society. I remember when I was reading the Bible and I read about Lamech, I was like, why is this guy in here? Like, it's weird that he's even included, that we get, like, we're hearing about, okay, this guy, then this guy, then this guy. We don't hear any stories. And then suddenly out of nowhere, we hear this one guy for like a few verses. Then we go right back to, then this guy was this and this and this and this. And you're like, why did he include that random story? It would have flowed better without it. And you realize, oh, it's part of the narrative. We're showing the slow degradation of society.
Yeah.
We eventually get to, in Genesis 6, 2 chapters later, the sons of God and the daughters of man, which there's a lot of people's interpretations over it, but some people say it's polygamy. Some people say it could be prima nocta, which, if you've ever seen Braveheart, you know what that is. It's really vile, disgusting thing. But there's certain things going on with that, or it could be an angels of some sort doing something.
Angels.
But yeah, and we even hear when you talk about Abraham and Sarai and Hagar, notice the parallels, because again in Genesis you see parallel. Genesis is a very beautiful book for this reason.
Right.
Adam listened to his wife. His wife offers something to him, and he listened to his wife, and he sins. What happens in Genesis? I think it's probably it's Genesis 16 verse 2. It says Abraham listened to Sarah, or Sarai, I should say, Sarai. So she offers him his slave girl, or they not slave girl, but concubine, I should say, and then he listened to his wife. So it's a repetition of what happened earlier, and so that should also show you it's a sin, because it was a sin before, now it's a sin this time,
right,
when he's offered another woman. Every time we hear about it, we hear about it as something bad. Isaac had one wife, Rebecca. Esau was a polygynist. Um, he had some problems with that. Jacob was a polygynist with Leah and Rachel. That caused all sorts of strife, like you said. And this guy brings it up as an example of something good. Like, oh, look, Jacob had multiple wives. Well, that's a direct violation of Leviticus 18:18, which hadn't existed at the time, but it was still something he outlaws later. It says you cannot have a woman and her sister as your wives.
Yeah.
Even in Genesis 28:2, Jacob's parents told him to bring back one wife, and he doesn't do that. Joseph is pretty much the best guy in Genesis. He has one wife, and he's the one guy out of anybody who has the best ability to have multiple wives. He's the most powerful dude out of anybody we learn about in Genesis in our lineage, and he doesn't take multiple wives. We hear about Deuteronomy. Kings should not multiply their wives. Moses had one wife. He wasn't maybe the best dude all the time, but we never hear anything bad about that. In fact, we actually hear a lot of good about his wife. She helps with the Exodus. Solomon, he quoted earlier. Well, Solomon had tons of problems with his wives. In fact, that's pretty much his calling card. It literally says he had 700 wives and 300 concubines, and then there was terrible stuff happened from that. They led him away from God. Yeah. So, anyway, let's continue here.
Okay.
Not ideal. When you think about it, one of the first commandments God gave us was to be fruitful and multiply. Later, he commands us not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. So which of these two commands do you suggest that women break to uphold some tradition in monogamy that ain't even in the Bible? Polygyny.
Okay. Again, right? False dichotomy, right? Be fruitful. So Mike Winger points this out. This command is not incumbent upon all believers. And we know that because Jesus and Paul tell us that. They say singleness is fine, and in fact, it's even virtuous despite its difficulties. Right. It's not a calling for everyone, but the idea to be fruitful and multiply is not there. And he kind of puts it as, well, if you want to be fruitful and multiply, if you don't want to dishonor God, right, you're going to have to either marry a pagan, or you're going to have to marry me, the alpha male. It's like, I don't think that's how that works, buddy. I don't know about that.
Can fix that gender gap and start to balance out some of those numbers. Plus, it's just plain smart. Not only financially, but then women can share housework and child rearing, and it just makes life easier for everyone involved. Reason number 3.
Okay, so that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because there's more mouths to feed, which means you need more income. So someone else is going to have to be working.
Maybe they're all working from home, and they have just like six incomes with 6 kids, and they're making over 7 figures a year because they're all just doing some.
But you'll notice again, he specifically does not mention the trade-offs. What are the trade-offs here? Who's getting the short end of the stick?
There's no downside.
It's the women, right? They will have to share. There's abundance of everything. Look, we'll have so much more time with the child rearing and the education, all this stuff. You'll have more time on your hands. Well, guess who doesn't have a lot of time on his hands? The husband. And so they've got to share all that free time. What are they doing with it? This will be more efficient. Well, there's only one husband to share. You can only have intimacy with one woman at a time, with one, all this stuff going on, sharing, time. And that's not just sexual intimacy. It's all intimacy, right? Yeah. You cannot split your time. So they're going to have to share, and he gets the benefit. Right?
Yeah. It's all him. I mean, it's literally all, it's all for his pleasure. And yeah, he doesn't bring out I guess the downsides to this. I mean, these women are going to get neglected. You can't have 10 wives and show them the love that Christ commands you to show your wife. Like, you can't be one flesh with multiple women. Right? I mean, it's not what the Bible commands. He leaves his father and his mother, joins to his wife, and they become one flesh. His wife, right? So it comes down to this thing where he's kind of just leaving out, like he's making it seem like there is no downside. That's what he's making it seem like when there are a plethora.
Yeah. All right, listen to his next argument. This one's crazy.
Okay. Embrace your natural desires. Check it, fam. Polygyny.
Where have we heard that one before, huh? Like literally every non-Christian ever. What about my natural desires, bro?
Ain't about ignoring our natural desires. It's about recognizing and respecting them. Attraction and companionship are part of who we are as humans. Have you ever wondered why a woman's biological clock stops at 35 to 40 years of age when she hits menopause, but men can make babies until we're basically fossils?
Pause it. This is making women sound like all they're good for is baby machines. This is belittling women. This is not loving women. This is using them for what they can give you. This is like pragmatism, right? They had this biological clock that's ticking. You must get it out of them while you can. You get pleasure out of it, but you have to use them for what they are. And yeah, naturally we are sinful. Exactly. And again, this idea, embrace your natural desires. Why can your natural desires not be like embraced with your one wife? Like Solomon makes this so clear in Proverbs chapter 5. I think you might have heard Mike say this, right? You can embrace your natural desires with the wife of your youth, like God commands you to, through Solomon.
And if you want variety, buy her a wig. All right, tonight, honey, you're a redhead tonight. I gotta get some variety in me here. But yeah, it's and notice he says your natural desires. Whose natural desires? Notice how he doesn't mention the natural desires of women. Now he will mention that later, but it's kind of sketchy and a little shoehorned in. Right. Whose natural desires? His natural desires. Yeah. Also, as Kiana, our wonderful fan here, says, not all natural desires are good, right? We have natural desires to steal, lie, etc., right? You could even extend this to all sorts of things, like the sexual realm. Why get married at all, right? This sounds like an argument for polyamory, not polygyny, right?
Yeah.
And then he says bio clock. So that biological clock, that's half true. It is true that like a man theoretically could father a child at like 80, I guess, but sperm quality is like greatly diminished. Yeah. You would have a lot of health issues with a child from that, and that's all assuming he can perform in the first place. So when people say that, I mean, is it technically true? Yes, but it's very overemphasized among these sorts of red pill guys. Well, we can have kids until we're like 80. It's kind of true, but not really. Kind of true, but not really. So that's just something important. But again, notice how he's putting man's desires first, not Scripture.
Exactly.
1 Corinthians 7 tells us, again, what to do about our natural desires. It says this also talks about the wife having sexual rights to her husband and over his body, and him over her body. There's nothing about sharing them, right? It's complete right. So
God set that whole system up, and it begs the question, why would God do that? Let's face
it. What does that sound like? Sounds like, and we won't get into this, but it sounds like the gay arguments, right? Well, why would God make me this way?
Yeah.
Why would, it's
Well,
God, we live in a fallen world. We have
yeah.
lots of different desires.
Yeah.
That doesn't, why would God want me to have all this money if he didn't want me to rob banks?
Yeah, right. Well, like,
No.
and again, it kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago. Like, we have only experienced life post fall, so your assumption that your desire is pure and not like mangled by your sin nature, like Kiana said, is, I mean, that's a presupposition that you cannot find in Scripture. I mean,
True.
your sinful desires corrupt every part of like how you think, how you live before Christ. There is nothing, and to think that anything in there is somehow redeemable about how you look at women or anything, it's not. You cannot be a lustful Christian. Like, sorry, I won't get into all that. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Older men are never going to stop being attracted to younger women, and younger women are never going to stop being attracted to older men. It's biology, plain and simple. By embracing polygyny, Christian men can stay true to their natural inclinations and stay true to their faith-based values. Have you noticed how many young men today are converting to Islam? It's partially because they see polygyny as a way to fulfill their desires, flex some social status, and feel good about themselves.
Okay. Hold on here. First off, he said fulfill their desires, gain social status, and makes you feel good. What does that sound like? Mike Winger says that's pride, the pride of life. That's the lust of the flesh. That's all these different things that the Bible outlines as bad.
Right.
Now, notice again, he says, look at Islam. We got to be more like Muslims. Saying to look at a demonic religion and copy that, I'm going to be honest with you, bro, that's probably not a good argument, right? Well, look at this religion, demonic. We should totally copy what they're doing so we can. No. And it's like we're not gonna dangle sin in front of people in order to get them to follow Christ, right? So, yeah, all right. It's just crazy here.
Without being told they're pieces of shit for doing it. But it's not just about the fellas. Polygyny also embraces the natural desires of women too. Follow me. See, women are
okay. Listen to this.
hypergamous. They want to date up and they want to marry up. But with more women getting educated and earning like never before in history, it creates slim pickings out there for the women. It's like a game of musical chairs, and it creates a buyer's market for the men. Ironically, biblical polygyny would actually increase a woman's value because there would be more brides and less single women on the market, incentivizing
until you get married, and then you're like getting a third of your husband's time, and that's assuming he even likes you the most. What he'll probably do is just pick his favorite, like with Rachel and Leah, and your chopped liver, right?
Yep.
So your value's increased. Yeah, I totally won't forget about
I'm
you.
done with you, though.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So she'll have to share, and that will fulfill her desires. That's a woman's true desire, gentlemen. She wants to share her husband. No, I don't think so.
No.
I know I've talked to my girlfriend before, and I make jokes about this. I say, "Oh, what would you think about me marrying another girl?" She'll be like, "I am not sharing you with anybody." So I'm gonna say, in my anecdotal experience, women are not too fond of that for sure.
Yeah, I walked in there like after I got done watching the video, and I asked my wife. I was like, how would you feel, right? And it was not positive. It was not a positive thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, women do not crave to share the man that they are married to or that they love. They crave his full attention. I promise you from experience.
Oh yeah, exactly. And he says they don't have to settle for the scraps. That's literally what they're doing, regardless, I guess, on your view though, because they'll have to settle for part of you.
Men to marry younger before all the good ones get taken. Right now, outside of wanting to be obedient to God, there's almost no incentive for men to get married. Polygyny changes that. In addition, it lets women marry the top tier men instead of settling for the scraps. Many women would rather share a good, godly alpha man than have a beta man all to themselves. And
listen to an alpha man and a beta man.
When you look at the fact that 80% of the single women right now are sleeping with the top 20% of the men, that proves to you that what I just said is true. Reason number 4.
This guy is like listening to Fresh and Fit and the Whatever podcast as like instead of his Bible time, my dude. got to get some more listening to the ESV in your life, my guy. He says 80% of women sleep with the top 20% of men. So this is a true concept. Again, this is how they talk. It's true. It's not that he's saying things that are necessarily completely false. Women are hypergamous. That's a readily observable fact. But from that, that doesn't get us to polygyny, right? These women, and the men included, are not the high quality men and women. As Mike Winger points out, these are people you exclude immediately from your dating pool to begin with. So you're including all these women that you're not that aren't even marriageable in the first place. He said they're sleeping with all these other men. If they're sleeping with other men, they're already, I thought you said they weren't marriage material. So why aren't you just excluding them from the get-go?
They can be
These
like
are
his
all
sixth wife or
fornicators.
whatever, so he doesn't like worry about it because
Right.
if he marries somebody with a past, it has to be like his throwaway third or fourth wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like you're talking about fornicators. You're not talking about people who are, top tier marriage material. You're talking about fornicators. So I don't know what he's going on about there. But here's his fourth reason.
4, expansion of the family and community. Remember that be fruitful and multiply command? God meant that, and it was one of his first commandments. Now, a woman can give birth once a year, but a man can literally make hundreds of babies a year under polygyny if he went on the spree. Again, God gave man that ability. Why would God do that? Plus, polygyny.
Okay, hundreds of babies a year. Now, I think he's exaggerating, but basically what he's saying there is you want a bunch of fatherless children, right? Because he's not going to have time to be a father to all those kids.
Right.
If you had 100 babies a year, you would barely remember their birthdays, and you certainly wouldn't be able to get the time off of work to be 100 days of the year. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, boss, I need 100 days off because I got 100 kids. You gotta show up to their birthday party. Oh, they're all graduating this year, so I got 100 days off of work. Like a third of your year is literally just going to like parties.
That's literally half of my graduating class from high school.
Yeah.
Like I had 200 something people in my class like 10 years ago or 8 whatever years ago. And he's saying that men, if they went on a spree, could have half of my high school graduating class. And yeah, imagine fathering that many kids. Imagine it's impossible. I mean, there is no way for you to love your children in any sort of meaningful fashion when you just have like a small, college campus behind your house full of kids,
Exactly. And it's important to also note that this brings up an interesting difference in right-wing versus left-wing thinking and mating strategies and sort of interesting things. I know Jordan Peterson has talked about this before. There are creatures like insects, for example. Generally speaking, insects use low input, high output mating strategies. So they will not raise their young, but they'll have like 10,000. Right. And it depends, there are certain ones that only have like a little bit, but generally speaking, those types of creatures have high output. Most of them don't survive, right? Like a mosquito, they have like 100 something probably, and most of them don't survive. But the ones that do, right, it's basically kind of like they're spreading their bets out. Now with mammals, especially human beings, we have low output but high input, right? We spend 18 plus years raising the kids, protecting the kids, but we don't have that many. So we kind of put all our bets on one and hope that all of our input into them works really well. Now, if you're a polygynist or you're someone who's into like a sort of a left winger type of thing, not a Mike Winger, a left winger. But if you're sort of like that, you kind of approach things from more of a again, if we're strictly speaking at the biological level, you're talking about spreading your genes out as much as you can and having very little input. The problem is when you are creating a society, that's about the worst thing you can possibly do, because you're not inputting into your kids values that make them productive members of society. Right. You're spreading genes, so you're being a good animal, but you're not being a good human. You're not being a good civilized creature.
Living the
So,
Darwinian dream.
exactly. And unfortunately, that does not make a good society.
Yeah.
Polygyny ensures kids inherit quality genes because more women are mating with the alphas. The Bible says
Again, I can't take him seriously when he says alphas. He says better quality genes. So he's kind of making sort of like a eugenics-based argument here. Now, I agree that better genes is good. I agree. Like, it would be awesome if everybody could be Giga Chad, like me and this guy and Andrew, right? We're all Giga Chads, obviously. And that'd be awesome if everybody could look like us. It would be awesome if all the women looked hot and we all were just like the master race or whatever the heck. I don't know what the heck this guy's going on about. But basically, the idea would be, if we all look like models, that would be awesome. That would be great. But looking like models is not something that should be prioritized above having civilized kids, right? Or civilized people. If everybody looks hot, but they're all the kind of people that he's been ragging on the whole time, fornicators and adulterers and miscreants and going around causing trouble because they don't have a father in their lives, what good is that?
Right.
So all your kids are basically just going to be the 20% of men that you're complaining about right now, right? Well, all the women are going after the 20% of men. Well, your daughters are going to be that 80% and your sons are going to be that 20%. Do you want them to be like that? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But you're right. Your sons will look like Giga Chad. Fair enough. I'll give it to him.
Says children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed are those who fill their quiver with them. So the Bible teaches that having a lot of kids is a good thing. And the biological family is the number one tool to produce.
It also says to raise your sons and your children so that they will know the way to go. Right? It says to raise them correctly. So again, if my son looks like handsome Squidward, but he's going around, robbing and looting and doing all sorts of bad stuff and fornicating, I wouldn't call that a success.
And raise disciples to take over the world and populate heaven. But the devil has blinded us into thinking that a man can't take more than one wife. And let me tell you, that lie leads.
Do you see him zoom in on himself? The devil has told you that you can't have more than one. Well, buddy, no.
It's also him assuming, and I'm not sure where I'm assuming the rest of his theology probably isn't great, but at the same time, that he says I'm gonna have all these kids so I can populate heaven. First off, that's a big assumption that all your kids are gonna go to heaven. So
right.
So I mean, it's a thing where it's like I wonder where his theology's at. If maybe that's just like a Freudian slip. I don't know. Maybe he believes. I don't know. In some sort of like universalism. I don't know. But if he's assuming his kids are going to go to heaven, if he has 1,000 of them, whatever, so he can populate it, I'm kind of curious what he believes.
Yeah.
So all kinds of problems. Wives become hard-hearted, rebellious, disrespectful, and the men, if they don't end up cheating and ruining everything, they stay in the relationship and their kids grow up seeing them weak and powerless, and then the cycle continues throughout the generations. It's a vicious cycle, but polygyny, it breaks that power dynamic and it allows parents to raise good, godly children. You see, patriarchy without polygyny, it is possible, but polygyny without patriarchy, now that's impossible. So polygyny.
Okay, so he's basically saying like he wants more power. It's not good enough to be the head of the household. We gotta have more power. It's like, what? Buddy, what are you talking about?
It's about expanding your family, but it's all.
No, it's okay. No, go ahead.
Okay. Also about building strong communities and raising generations of warriors for God. Reason number 5, FOMO. Many men.
And here we have the cherry on top, the final argument. Well, because you're going to miss out, bro. You're going to miss out.
You're gonna miss out, man.
This is the argument for polyamory and the argument for fornication itself, which is something he's saying is wrong. He's saying that's wrong, but listen to what he's saying. He said, well, you're going to miss out. That argument could be used for fornication.
Yeah.
And fear getting married young because they haven't hit their sexual marketplace value peak. As they get older and they start earning more, their value is going to rise, and they don't ever feel like they settle later. They also don't want to fornicate because
sorry, go. No, yeah. You go.
Well, I was going to say that is true. I mean, what he is saying is true that there's a such thing as sexual marketplace value, and And women, it tends to be their looks, and men, it tends to be income, social status, that type of thing. Again, they start with a true observation, right? But then they go from that and they leap to something that isn't true, right? Like that's where your value lies entirely. It's part of value, I guess, but as Mike Winger points out, Scripture says a man's character is the measure of his value.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and again, he's otherwise saying, well, you either have to settle or you have to go with this. It's a false choice.
Yeah, and again, he's making this idea that having one wife is going to lead you to this place. Again, he paints it in this horrible picture just leading up to this.
Right.
Like, men are going to be like more likely to cheat. The woman's going to become cold hearted if she's the only wife. And then he goes on to say men are going to feel like they settled when their value rises if they get married young. First off, he said earlier men should be getting married younger. That's why he wanted to suck all the women up, so men would be encouraged to get married younger before they're all scooped up. That's what he said earlier. But at the same time, if he's talking about his life being fully submitted to Jesus, in what world does Jesus ever look at those that like his one bride and ever say that he settled? Okay, his
Right.
value went up a lot when he, resurrected and then he ascended into heaven. He was set at the right hand of the Father. His value raised a whole bunch, right? And to us, he was obviously God the whole time. Don't get that twisted. But
Yeah.
he was set on this throne, and is he going to all of a sudden look down at us, his filthy, disgusting, sinful bride, and feel like he settled? In what world? I hope at the glorious marriage supper of the Lamb, he doesn't have his bride sitting at the table, the beautiful church that is cleansed by his blood, look at them and say, man, I settled. How is that
Yeah.
Christ-like? How is that Christ-like? And man, it just blows me away that this guy can look at this idea of a monogamous, beautiful marriage with one wife that you pour your life out for the rest of your life. And Lord willing, obviously, if you both live long enough, but and say that that's something that you might look at and be like, I settled. I've gone up so much in value and status. I've just really settled. She's devaluing this beautiful woman that he's given you. It makes me sick. I'm just being completely honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
They've been told that's a sin, and they're not wrong there either. But they're young and their hormones are raging. So what's a young man to do? Because they've been falsely taught that monogamy is the only marriage structure acceptable to God, what they do instead is they go out and fornicate and feel guilty about it. They sleep around and break women's hearts, and that makes it harder for those same women to pair bond later in life when they do get married. Remember, 80 to 90% of the divorces are being filed by women right now. That is a pair bonding problem, and it's a direct result of the false doctrine of monogamy only. With polygyny, marriage becomes more attractive to men. If a man knows before marrying that he can marry another later in life if he so chooses, that's a game changer. Men are unlikely to surrender their single opportunity if they think there's a chance that they might find a woman they find more desirable down the road. So instead, they hang on to it, and they repeat an endless cycle of sinning and repenting, or they just abandon the whole thing out of guilt.
Again, he's talking about trading up, right?
Yeah.
Again, God made provisions for all this. And the provision was a man has the ability to go out and marry more than one woman if he so chooses. So that's it. Those are my 5 reasons why Christian men should pursue polygamy. I hope you enjoyed it. Do me a favor, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave your comment with your biggest takeaway. I also have a coaching program where I help men who believe in plural marriage find their first wife with the potential to take more down the road if they so choose, and that woman can't divorce them because that's the agreement. So if you need some help, if you need some coaching.
Did you hear that? I left that part in for a reason. He said, I'm going to teach you how to get your 2 wives and, or I guess, I mean, again, technically, legally, you wouldn't be able to do that, but he'll be able to somehow make some sort of agreement and she can't leave. You hear how controlling that sounds?
Yeah.
Who's in charge here? Jesus or this guy?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. No, this guy is.
And don't worry, I'll get you to trick them into a contract so that they can't leave. Even if they want to, they're stuck. It's like,
Yeah.
bro, what?
it really makes me sad for people and maybe, and I don't know, maybe he has these women. I don't know how they're staying. I don't know how they can come to the conclusion unless they were just polyamorous beforehand and they were just it fit their views on life, so they came into this marriage relationship with this guy. I don't know, but the fact that he thinks he can help men find their first wife and then learn, I guess I'm assuming, learn how to pull more in, seems very culty. I'll just be perfectly honest. It's like you're teaching people how to get that first wife and then suck them in and then get the rest and suck them in, and you get this weird control over these people, and it really scares me for those people.
Yeah. Well, I will. There's a little bit more of the video, but I think we pretty much covered that part of our stream. Now, we're not quite done yet, but before we do finish out, I would like to give you an opportunity. Tell us where people can find you.
Yeah, I mean, I have X or Twitter. I don't really use it that often. Articulate Apologetics. All of my stuff is the same. Articulate Apologetics. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Don't post there much either. And TikTok. I post there every once in a while. So yeah, you can find me there.
Yeah, well, and I would say this guy definitely deserves your subscription if you're someone watching from my side, and if you're watching from his end, definitely
come his way.
Check out my channel, take a peek around. I mean, I hope I've earned it, you know. I think both of us had some great commentary tonight.
No, man, I really appreciate you letting me come on and have this conversation. It was great, man. I've really enjoyed it, and I know you're clearly, I would say, a lot more for Islam. I haven't studied a lot. I just know the small, normal stuff that, maybe the more basic stuff about that, but you seem pretty knowledgeable on that stuff, and that's great. And I would recommend, if y'all want to go check out Womb's channel, please do it. It was great, and he's very, very you've heard it throughout the stream, very faithful, preaching the word of God, and wanting to gently correct. So yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Well, all right. I guess that would wrap it up for us. If you want to see more from us, go subscribe, and we'll catch you later.
Yeah, see y'all later.
God bless.